Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's see who shows up today.
So we give it a few minutes to get more people clicking in.
Yeah. So we have Tommy at least. Yeah, I'll give people till 5 after, say. We have an hour scheduled, is that right?
Yeah.
I would be shocked if we used the whole hour.
Rich, Taro, or Martin, could I interest one of you in taking notes for us today?
I can give it a go up until the point that I need to say something.
Thanks.
Do you mind if I check if we have the slides available?
Yeah. Should be available.
Oh. Oh, very odd. Okay. Yeah, so that is there. There are also a number of other slides that seem to have nothing to do with
Yeah,
with this
I
session.
saw that. Can we remove other
Athletics.
people's? But I don't know if that'll like remove it for.
Yeah, it doesn't really hurt.
There's a little delete. Siobhan, are you clicking the little delete button?
Oh no.
I'm going to go ahead and click the delete button for these because I don't care about SNMP or NAT64 or IVI. Although IVI is a cute acronym.
I wonder if all the interims get put in the same pool. Side pool.
Maybe. All right, it's 5 after. This may be who we get. In which case, we'll have a last call to give other people a chance to comment. Sean, you want to kick us off?
Sorry, yeah. And welcome all to the virtual interim. This is the second one that we've had. The goal is really to just make some progress on the outstanding issues on the sent Oblivious HTTP messages draft, and I guess the overall goal is to do the last call sometime early next year. So just in the interest of speeding up progress on the draft, that's why we wanted to do the interim. Just a reminder that note well applies, and Martin has will be taking some notes. So thank you, Martin. Was my audio garbled for a second?
You're just
Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but I think really the overall like the time of the interim will just be going through Tommy's slides. So yeah, Tommy, I think you can take us away.
Okay. All right. So thank you, and thanks for setting up the virtual interim as a forcing function to make the authors close out issues and publish a new version. That seems to be the primary function so far. So we just published a 03 version yesterday that closes out pretty much all of the open issues, other than just some housekeeping things that I'll mention at the end. But we want to confirm that the resolutions are sensible here. Some of them we discussed at the last IETF, but just want to cover it all. Okay, so as a recap, I think we all know this. We're trying to chunk OHTTP. It allows us to indeterminate. It allows us to encrypt and decrypt in separate chunks, so we can have longer or slower messages. Okay, so of the updates that we put in, first, we made it a must that if you send with the chunked media type, you must also have the response be of that media type. They must match. This simplifies things greatly for negotiation or configuration. And we also mentioned that clients should only use one media type or another and not fall back between them, so as to not be partitioned. This is mentioned both in the primary body of the text as well as in the security and privacy considerations. I guess it is conceivable that there is some use case out there that might want to have some fallback, but that brings with it risks of being partitioned between the different clients. So if you want to be using chunking and you're configured to do that, do it. Otherwise, don't. Any thoughts, concerns here? I think this one was also discussed previously and was fairly straightforward.
Yeah, that resolution makes sense to me given the discussion.
Thank you for confirming. All right, so the next one was the maximum chunk size. This, I just quoted the text that we added, so you can read it on your screen. Essentially, it's saying let's have it be a 16K chunk size is the default thing that everyone has to support. So this is the minimum maximum chunk size that implementations must have. This is the same size that TLS records have because reasons, and like symmetry is good and doesn't need to be bigger if TLS doesn't make it bigger. It allows implementations, if they know they can support larger sizes on the peer, to use larger sizes on the peer. There was one question here that I had in specifically writing out the text, which is what exactly does this size apply to? Is it applying to the data that goes into the chunk, the plain text size, or is it applying to the size after adding the tag, adding any encapsulation that one might have? This text refers to it as the size prior to the encapsulation, so that would be the plain text size. I did this purely because as a sender, it's easy for me to just limit how much you get to send and for me to copy before I encapsulate it. Does anyone have any other opinions on this, or does this sound reasonable?
So TLS does it this way, completely this way. So that's fine. It's kind of a little bit annoying sometimes, because if you had the idea that you'd have a nice evenly sized buffer for holding these things, if you get a 16K thing, you're actually doing 16K plus 16, which is a little annoying, but
it's annoying when you're dealing with the encrypted chunks.
Yeah.
But nice when you're dealing with the unencrypted. Yeah. So.
Right.
But this, yeah, this is, if this is what TLS does, which is what I thought it was, then why change? Okay, great. Thank you. There was a pseudocode fix that Martin found, which was good. He was in the process of implementing, I believe, and was like, oh, this last chunk thing is annoying because you don't know when it's going to be the last chunk. And I was like, oh, no. But we use a sentinel value of a length 0 to mean it's the last chunk. And we realized that the text that described things said that, but then the examples did not show that correctly. So this is just a fix, and kind of reiterating to everyone, because I think it was confusing before, depending on which portion of the document you read, that the last chunk has a length field of 0. That is how you know it's the last chunk. That is how you know there's a different AAD, which is the final string. And then the last chunk extends to the end of the string. This is what we had implemented from day one, but I think it had caused some confusion for people. Okay. The authors also received an email of someone noticing that change and asking about it. So just wanted to call that out for the record. Okie dokie. Then the largest set of textual changes were in the security considerations, primarily around trying to explain the whole interactivity case in more detail. Defining it more clearly as any case where the client request, the content of that or the timing of that is influenced at all by the response. And I added kind of bullets in there to enumerate kind of the different possible ways you could end up using chunked, and highlight the fact that in any case where the client sends the request in a single chunk or sends all of the request chunks before it gets the response, those inherently cannot be interactive and don't have kind of any added concerns of this interactivity, allowing this server or the gateway to understand the timing and the round trip to the client, and then trying to elaborate more clearly that if the client is essentially in control of whether or not things are interactive by how it is sending its request, and that we acknowledge that there are some cases, like if you really want to do HTTP 100s with 100 continue, then you are taking on the fact that this is interactive and you're going to kind of accept this change, but otherwise, if you don't want it, don't do it. And then there was a note in there that Martin added, which was good, to say that like in other protocols, having interactivity can be a way to reduce like a replay risk, because this is new stuff, but since we don't have perfect forward secrecy here, then like that is not the case. So it's like, don't think interactivity is going to gain you anything on a security standpoint. Any thoughts here? This is one where it's worth reading the text and kind of analyzing and see if there's any issues with.
So probably I might as well send video as well. The challenge that I think we had here was trying to reason through all the different implications of the interactivity and what that might mean from a security perspective. And the most interesting case, as Tommy highlights in the new text, is the case where the client conditions its behavior on something that comes back from the server. So 100 continue is the classic example of that. Until you get the 100 response back from the server, you don't send anything. That's just a timing-based thing. Any interactivity will naturally add some sort of timing information. That's not a huge deal necessarily. But where there's other conditioning, that's where it gets really interesting. And the suggestion is, don't do that, basically, for the most part. What you're doing by conditioning behavior is directly revealing the RTT. That's unavoidable once there's some amount of back and forth. And I don't think there's much other risk other than that, but it does mean that you do engage that replay risk in new and potentially interesting ways. So if there's nothing saying that you can't be convinced to send something through interactivity that is then later replayed and used as an attack against you. And so trying to reason through all of the different ways in which that might cause you problems later on is just not worth it. So don't, basically.
Yeah. Without an explicit forbidding, because if you want to do 100, continue, like, knock yourself out.
Yeah, I'm most interested in the other 1xx responses for something like this. So you get a response back and it contains some hints about some other things that you might want to do in a 103 or something like that. Or talking about the upload scenario, the 104 case, where you might want to be able to upload a very large file and know that you can sort of recover from a break in the connection. Acknowledging, of course, that once you do that, you've created a connection between the multiple requests that you're making, and you've lost some amount of privacy that you might have hoped for.
Right. Although in a case in which you want to explicitly doing that, otherwise over at OHTTP, like, you have no way to let these things be linked, and so this allows you to at least control the scope in which it is linked. Like, you know, it's just these two parts of the request. Okay. Yeah, so I think this is the most interesting bit. Probably, something we'll get comments and reviews on, and it's worth the scrutiny. And that's it for the changes that we put in. The two issues we have open are to do to fill out the test vectors for this, because that's nice and handy for people implementing. We had discussed a bit at the last meeting. We have an issue for, like, should we have a formal analysis of it? That would be good, but that's contingent on people having time. And so I think this is also a question to the chairs for, like, as we're doing. So the other thing we mentioned before was we have the dependency on the incremental header field, and there are different ways you could handle that. You can leave it as like a normative thing, and we just wait for that document to mature, or at least be stable and good before we ship this off. We could still do a working group last call, kind of finalize this document and leave a dangling reference that gets completed later, We could try to change the reference to not be normative, but if there is a chance that that header would drastically change, it would be annoying to ship an RFC that is just like misleading in terms of its examples here. And so then potentially, depending on how long this takes to wait for that, things like formal analysis could be done in parallel, even if the working group is happy with the content of the document otherwise.
So remind me, Tommy, that the incremental thing is not required to make this mechanism function. It's just a way that the client can request incremental delivery of the response.
Yeah, as well as of the request, if the request happened to be multiple chunks, yes. It is currently a should on there, partly because in multiple implementations of this was like a problem where you have to do like the explicit thing of saying like, hi, relay, can you please turn on your incremental delivery behavior, because by default you don't do it. I think it is important to have that text in there as a warning to implementers that like, you're probably going to hit this if you don't think about it. I believe it is a good thing to say that you should mark the header if the header exists. So I don't think it would make sense to like ship this document, mention the problem, and not mention a possible solution or a possible way to alleviate the problem or help negotiate the incrementality of delivery. But beyond that, I think we can be flexible.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if it's, given what you were basically assuming what you just said, like it seems like it could possibly be made like an informative reference for a way that you could signal this. So still discuss the problem, still point to this mechanism as a way you could solve it, but it wouldn't need to be, a normative dependency that would block us.
I guess I would also ask, like, what is the what's the harm of having a normative dependency? Because we could progress a document and let it go into misref as an option, right? Like,
Sure.
It doesn't have to spend working group time, but maybe we just don't like that. Martin has opinions.
Of course I do.
That's why you're
about
here.
this and many things. I'm personally not concerned about having this wait in the queue for the incremental work to finish. I think this is not that urgent that we would need it to be rushed through, and it is, I think, stronger with the should that we currently have. I think the should is one of those cases where it is pitched at exactly the right level. There will be some cases where someone doesn't want to send the should, the incremental thing, and ignore the should. But for the most part, I think people will need to do that so that the intermediaries do the right thing. It may be the case that they just know that their particular intermediary doesn't have that problem. But that's, yeah.
And that would also, and then the other nice thing about having a normative reference is that we can say, that if you're going to solve this problem, then here is the particular way you should solve it.
Right. I think we're fairly confident in HTTP that this is approximately the right shape. There may be some spelling changes over time, but my sense is that there's pretty clear support for the idea, and I doubt we'll change the spelling in practice. So I don't expect it to be a problem, but it's just a little safer if we wait. And frankly, we can ship from the draft, as people have done already.
Exactly.
On the front, so the actual reason I hit the raised hand button was the formal analysis point. I'm inclined to not have that be a blocker unless, certainly not a blocker on last call.
Sure.
So like, go ahead and issue the last call, and if someone thinks we should hold this for formal analysis, then let them speak up there, and we can see if the working group agrees.
That makes sense to me. I would be inclined to say like formal analysis is great and we would like people to do it, and there's a chance that I heard Chris was trying to arrange teaching some of us how to do more formal analysis, so we can try it out, and if we find stuff, absolutely let's use that to inform the document. But yeah, not blocking makes sense, and if this is going to have a slightly longer window of being in some queue somewhere, that gives formal analysis time to do that. As it says on the slide, I'll point out HTTP has issued the adoption call here. We've gotten a couple of positive responses. So I would really hope that if there are shape changes, that those are worked out in the next 6 months, right? Not any longer than that. So, and maybe it takes time for that to be published as an RFC, but the discussion to be had around that isn't going to be hopefully so long that it's going to really change all over the place. The other thing I'll mention on this, sorry, go Shiva.
Just wondering, would we want to have an HTTP dir review, or an early review for this, given the normative reference?
I think the community overlap is there. We have people aware on both sides. They've attended both of the meetings. Having HTTP dir be part of the last call request makes sense.
Yeah. I would just make sure that the HTTP working group is aware of the working group last call when it goes out, and that's probably all that we need to do on that front. Given the nature of this work, it being primarily tied up in the sort of security aspects of it, I wouldn't say that there's a special need for them to be involved.
Seems like the media type request could also be handled in last call. Just send an email to the media, whatever that review mailing list is at that point.
That's what I was going to bring up here. That's something that I think Ted had brought up at the last meeting, which is a great point, that we should do the formal request for that. And I would mainly want guidance from the chairs on when is it appropriate to push that button and ask for that. Having that be in parallel with last call sounds eminently reasonable.
In parallel with last call sounds right to me, because what you want is to have a stable enough target that the media types folks can understand what they're evaluating. And last call seems like a nice stable spot. It ought to be stable.
Okay.
So we're going to do it then.
So let's just add that to the to-do list for that moment.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like then generating some test vectors is the main thing the document needs before we push the button.
Yeah, my implementation is extremely slow, thanks to asynchronous Rust being awful and not having a lot of time for it. But that was part of the reason why I was trying to implement, was to get to that point.
Fortunately, you only need to generate the test vectors once. And so if it takes a week, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I have to have the implementation first. I've got the binary HTTP implementation done, which was the hard part, but still, it'll take some time.
Good that you finally implemented that part of the RFC we already shipped.
Well, it's very easy if you have all the bytes in place.
Yes.
It's much harder if they're still trickling in, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, having implemented it, I
more
agree
than double
that
the size of my code.
Oh yes, going from a known size binary HTTP to the is it incremental that we call it, or indeterminate, vastly changes the complexity. Yeah.
So Martin, you're implementing Tommy. Do you have an implementation at all in progress?
Yeah, our implementation, we have multiple implementations of both client and server that are out there. And I believe Chris's, what was it? Is it a Go implementation of OHTTP? That one has a non-merged PR that supports this. That's out there on public GitHub.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So perhaps.
So I've been bugging Chris to also just generate the test vectors from that. But
Well, and given that we have multiple implementations, it would be good to verify they all pass the test vectors before we consider them fine.
Indeed.
Tommy, can we point to the implementations that you have for the client, like the multiple ones that you said for the client and the server? It'll be useful for the write-up that we do.
Sure. I mean, you can reference them. Those ones are not currently open sourced, so you can't actually point to their code, but they exist on iOS and macOS devices for the client side, and they exist in iCloud servers for the gateway bit.
Okay.
All right, so
All
it
right,
sounds like
that's
the
it.
plan of action is get some test vectors in and validate it and hit the last call button.
Sounds good.
It'll have to be a race, Tommy. You've got an implementation. I don't. So if you want to, if you're able to do something that might be easier than waiting for me, I've got
Sure. That's
like 2 weeks before I go on a month of vacation, so it may not happen in that time. Who knows?
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
And then, Tommy, would you mind just sending an email to the list just summarizing the changes? And then we can ask for folks for direct feedback on that. I guess
Sure.
basically the stuff
I
you
can
talked about
essentially
today.
email out that content from the slides here.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
All right, any other business? Should I go to the working group? I think we're good to go. Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thanks all. Bye.